afternoon, buenas tardes. My name is James Upland. I'm a professor in the Department of Romance Studies here at Boston University, as well as at the Center for Latin American Studies at the Frederick S. Pardee School of Global Studies, also here at the U. On behalf of my department, as well as the Center for Latin American Studies and the BU School of Theology, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's inauguration of the exhibit entitled Embroiderers of Memory, Historical Memory of the Women of El Salvador. The co-hosting of this exhibit forms part of the BU Department of Romance Studies Hispanic Voices Initiative, made possible by the generous support of Banco Santander's University's Global Division. The Hispanic Voices Initiative has as one of its principal objectives the organizing of events that highlight the rich culture of the Spanish-speaking world. By bringing distinguished authors, composers, musicians, filmmakers, and artists from Spain, Latin America, and the United States to engage with broad-based audiences in the Boston and New England area, Hispanic Voices hopes to strengthen the multicultural and multilingual, and cross-cultural dialogue that is so much a part of American society today. We will begin our inaugural activities with a welcome from the community here at the School of Theology, and Professor Cristiano de Rosa will give some opening remarks here.
Thank you, and welcome tonight. It is indeed a privilege to host this event here at the School of Theology. The Association of the Latinx students, plus many other faculty here and administrators have been working hard at this event. And we want to indeed give thank you to all of you for taking the time to be here tonight. As I looked at the information here on our posters and embroideries, it just took me back to my time in seminary. I went to seminary and I did my Master's of Divinity in Washington, D.C., which is the entry point for Central Americans. A lot of Salvadorians that came, and I did my Master's of Divinity in 81 to 83. So it was a key time in the history. So as I began reading and looking at those dates, and remembering indeed so many different communities that came and how I learned so much about Central America. I also remember women, as we look at the bordados de memoria by women and young women. I remember the young women that indeed came, and there are two in mind that I want to honor tonight that became pastors in the United Methodist Church. Women that did not only survive, but they thrived and then they became the ones that helped and facilitated for many other women. And I want to honor tonight as we welcome you and celebrate this opening, Reverenda Gabriela Garcia. She's a pastor in Lawrence, works so much with new immigrants still today, a lot of children. And I want to honor also Reverenda Antonieta Hernandez. She's a pastor in Las Vegas, Nevada. Also has worked for so many years with immigrant ministries, mainly from Central America. And then I want to remember that out of all the work and survival and courage of so many women that came to the United States from El Salvador, there were many young women that are striving today and indeed moving forward in many spaces. So I just got a new booklet called El Poemario de Colibrí, and it's by Erika Chilomé. And she has a poem here, young women, Mexican and Salvadorian, and she writes about immigration. So I'm going to read a segment of the poem that says, I was born to remember. Home is a living river of memory, patterns of immigration that weave the souls of creation on the canvas spaces of our feet, in the feathering of our language, in constant hum of our survival. Nací para recordar que el hogar es un río viviente de la memoria, rutas de migraciones que tejen el alma de la creación en las grietas de nuestros pies, en el plumar de nuestros idiomas, en el constante zumbido de nuestra sobrevivencia. So with that, I welcome everyone tonight, and we thank everyone that helps us to organize this event.
Thank you very much. We will now hear a few introductory words from Ena Peña, Consul General of the Republic of El Salvador here in Boston. I should point out that the consulate serves the entire New England area, not just Boston. Please welcome Ena Peña. She and her crew there at the consulate does an excellent job. They work a lot with the community.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Well, it's an honor for the Consulate of El Salvador being here, learning from the women from El Salvador. As a woman from as a Salvadorian woman, this is very important for me because I always learn history through books of men. So this is a part of our history through the eyes, and through the mind, and through the hands of rural women who were suffering the exile in Honduras, and now they revive the history through this exhibition. So it's very touching for me being here and remember all the history, all the suffer, all the struggle, and comes to my mind that immigration is a continuum, and as in those days they were leaving El Salvador because they need to be safe. So there is a parallel from that day to these days. So may this exhibition, may these women bordadoras de memoria may this exhibition remind us that the history, we have to integrate this history in our lives, and maybe they can give us more things to understand the immigration, the suffering of El Salvador, and can we build a better society, more human and more equal. I would like to thanks to Jim and Voces Hispánicas and this library as well, to my new friend. And also Santiago, Carlos Enriquez Consalvi, that I know him from many years ago. And I bring also a recognition for him, because I don't see him often. So I know him from 20 years ago, but I wanted to give him this recognition. And it says, in English, I translate, for his contribution to rescue the historic memory of El Salvador and la difusión de las nuevas generaciones a nivel nacional e internacional. Okay. I miss everything. Well, I don't know if us has any
all the cultural work that you'll be hearing more about what the museum does.
Muchas gracias, Carlos Enriquez Consalvi.
Okay, well, on that note, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Carlos Enriquez Consalvi, Director of the Museo de la Palabra y la Imagen, that is the Museum of the Word and the Image. Known in El Salvador as Santiago, Enriquez Consalvi was born in the Venezuelan stretch of the Andes Mountains. He spent much of his childhood in exile with his parents before beginning his studies in journalism in Caracas. After volunteering in disaster relief after the terrible earthquake in Managua, Nicaragua in 1972, Santiago carried out historical research projects in the archives of Paris, Madrid, and Rome. In 1977, he returned to Managua, where he wrote editorials in the newspaper La Prensa against the Somoza regime under the pseudonym Carlos Gallo. After the fall of Somoza, he helped to establish new radio stations as part of the revolutionary process. The murder of Archbishop Oscar Romero, now Saint Romero, in San Salvador in 1980, sparked his interest in the events beginning to unfold in the neighboring country. In December of that year, he traveled to El Salvador with the intention of founding a clandestine radio station in the area of the country controlled by the insurgent forces of the FMLN. In January of 1981, he began transmitting over the newly established Radio Venceremos station and continued to do so from the mountains of the Morazan province until the beginning of 1992, a full 11 years. It should be noted that a prime objective of the US advised and supported Salvadoran military during the entire war was to destroy Radio Venceremos, an objective they never achieved. At the Museo de la Revolución in Perquín, Morazán, you could see the casing of an unexploded 500-pound bomb intended for Santiago and his colleagues, plus the deep crater of one that did go off. That one didn't get him either, otherwise he wouldn't be here this evening. In January of 1992, Santiago came down from the mountains of Morazán and from the tower of the cathedral in San Salvador, he transmitted the celebration of the signing of the peace accords, which formally ended the Salvadoran Civil War and initiated the democratic transition, which has now led to a country in which the FMLN, the political party which grew out of the revolutionary insurgency of the 80s, now participates in free elections, which did not exist before that war, by the way. In the post-war period, Santiago founded the Museo de la Palabra y la Imagen, part of whose objective is to preserve and disseminate the historical and cultural patrimony of El Salvador and other Latin American countries. Among Santiago's written works are several novels and testimonial narratives, including La Terquedad de Izote, Luciérnagas en Mozote, Los Mendigos Me Amaban, and Tentaciones y Estropicios. It's produced a variety of excellent documentary films, including in Spanish, 1932, 1932, Cicatriz de la Memoria, La Frontera del Olvido, and La Palabra en el Bosque. I just watched La Palabra en el Bosque. It's on YouTube with him the other night. It's an amazing story which gives a lot of context to what you're seeing here tonight. These were the Christian-based communities that were growing up in Morazán and which were then savagely repressed. He has been curator of a wide number of exhibitions, both at the Museo de la Palabra y la Imagen and elsewhere. In the year 2009, Santiago was the winner of Holland's Prince Claus Award in recognition of his valuable work at the Museo de la Palabra y la Imagen. The Prince Claus Awards, supported by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, are presented annually to individuals, groups, and organizations in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean for their outstanding achievements in the field of culture and development. In December of this year, Santiago will travel to Madrid to represent the Museo de la Palabra y la Imagen in a ceremony for the 10 finalists for the 2019 United Nations Alliance of Civilizations Intercultural Innovation Award. By supporting innovative intercultural grassroots projects with the potential for expansion and replication, the Intercultural Innovation Award aims to contribute to peace, prosperity and building more inclusive societies. The Museos project, chosen from among 1,200 applicants in this year's competition, is called Escuelas de Paz, Schools of Peace, and involves educational and cultural workshops for young people living in the most disadvantaged areas of San Salvador and the surrounding area. These are the areas in which the famous Maras operate and from which they recruit their members. The Escuelas de Paz offer other, more positive kinds of opportunities for these same young people, and are actually looked upon favorably by the Maras themselves. You cannot operate in these neighborhoods without their permission, and they welcome these projects that Santiago and his colleagues are carrying out. Perhaps in our question and answer session, some of you might want to ask him some questions about this truly amazing initiative. But now on to the exhibition being inaugurated today here at BU. Please give a warm welcome to Santiago on behalf of the Boston University community and the Boston community in general. I'm going to be translating. This will be sequential translation, and I ask for everybody's patience. It's been a very long day, and I hope I can do the job well.
Bien, buenas noches. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos.
Una pregunta. How many of you know Spanish? Practically everybody. Okay, well, okay, some don't. So we'll. Sí, no, I will translate.
Bien, muchas gracias a la Universidad de Boston, gracias a la Escuela de Teología y en especial al personal de la biblioteca que ha ayudado a montar esta exposición.
I thank Boston University and the Boston University community, and I especially thank the people responsible for putting together the exhibit. If I can add, one of them is Kara Jackman, standing at the back of the room. Thank you, Kara.
Bien, voy a hacer una pequeña introducción histórica en relación a estos bordados de memoria.
And it would begin with a brief historical explanation about these embroideries.
En los años 70, El Salvador ya venía sufriendo medio siglo de dictaduras militares, sangrientas, que cerraban todos los espacios políticos y violaban los derechos humanos de todo nuestro pueblo.
In the 1970s, El Salvador had lived through already about a half century of very repressive regimes which did not allow any space for democratic activity. As you can tell, I'm synthesizing a bit, but so many people know Spanish. I will do so.
En ese contexto, las comunidades campesinas se organizaron fundamentalmente en lo que se conoció como las comunidades eclesiales de base.
Okay, within that context, the peasant communities in areas of the country such as Morazan began to organize these Christian-based communities, is the way we usually call them.
Comunidades donde fortalecieron su tejido social a través de la solidaridad y se planteaban la construcción del cielo en la tierra, así lo expresaban.
They began to through cooperative efforts, to consolidate their communities and to essentially engage in an attempt to create a heaven on earth.
A mediados de los años 70, los cuerpos policiales, fundamentalmente la Guardia Nacional, comenzaron a ver con sospecha que comunidades hicieran colectivamente sus milpas.
Right, in the middle of the 1970s, the National Guard began to be very suspicious of these groups that were beginning to carry out, for example, agricultural activities such as planting their cornfields together in a cooperative manner, and this made them suspicious.
Y estas comunidades campesinas empezaron a recibir la represión de los cuerpos armados del Estado.
So these groups began to suffer the repression of these different government
organizations, troops, etc., police that would come and repress them.
En 1980, sobre estos territorios de la parte norte de El Salvador comenzaron a realizarse grandes operativos militares donde comenzaron a asesinar a familias enteras y a crear el terror para tratar de desanimar esa organización campesina.
So in the 1980s, in this part of El Salvador, you can see it on the map here, the army began to carry out these large operations, going after these communities there and causing great harm and a lot of bloodline.
En enero de 81, la insurgencia guerrillera lanza una ofensiva en todo el territorio y la confrontación, o sea, la polarización del país ya llevó a extremos de conducirnos hacia una guerra civil.
Okay, so in 1981, the incipient guerrilla movement launched a large offensive across the entire country, and that in turn provoked this response from the government, and Salvadoran Civil War essentially began then.
En ese contexto se producen masacres masivas como la masacre del Mozote, que se realizó en esa zona donde viven estas comunidades campesinas, una masacre que costó la vida de 1000 campesinos, entre ellos 400 niños y niñas.
So in that year, one of the worst events of the whole war occurred, which was the massacre of over 1,000 peasants in Mozote. Of the 1,000, roughly 400 of them were children. I might add, by the way, all of this, if I can, that these forces were being supported by the government of the United States under Reagan. Okay, just in case we forget that.
La violencia contra estas comunidades campesinas hizo que miles y miles de familias cruzaran la frontera y buscaran refugio en la República de Honduras, donde se formaron los campamentos bajo la protección de las Naciones Unidas, del ACNUR.
So, thousands and thousands of these peasant families began to cross the border. There was simply no way to stay where they were, and they began to be sort of organized in these refugee camps under the protection of the United Nations in Honduras.
Cada campamento de refugiados podía tener 10,000 personas.
Each one of these refugee camps could have up to 10,000 people living in them.
Y en estos campamentos es donde se producen estos bordados que hoy traemos a la Universidad de Boston.
Okay, so in these camps, this is where these embroideries that we're looking at, this exhibition, the artwork here was produced in these camps.
Tradicionalmente la mujer campesina teje o bordaba pañuelos con pajaritos o flores para envolver las tortillas que le llevaba el esposo en la milpa.
So peasant women would, one of their forms of artisanry work was the embroidering. Typically they would embroider these napkins, which would then be, they would typically have flowers, birds, that sort of thing, and they would be used to wrap the tortillas that the husbands and other members of the family would take out to work in the fields.
Pero a partir de 1982, las mujeres comienzan a bordar escenas de violación a los derechos humanos para que el mundo entero conociera qué era lo que estaba sucediendo en El Salvador.
So in 1982, the women decided to change what they were putting in their embroidery. They wanted to represent scenes of what they were undergoing and their families were undergoing in this situation, in this war. So this is where these embroidery pieces begin to emerge.
En una de las vitrinas vamos a poder ver un dibujo bordado donde se ven los aviones, lanzando bombas contra la población civil.
So in one of the showcases, you will see one of the embroidery pieces in which you see a scene of the peasants being bombed from the air.
Entonces, estas mujeres cuyas fotografías podemos ver en la exposición, lo que no podían expresar con palabras, lo expresaban con el dibujo y el bordado.
So the women that we see in the pictures, and all these are the women that produced this embroidery work, and they decided to put into their artwork what they couldn't say in their own words. It was a way of getting the message out about what was happening through their artwork.
Estos bordados eran enviados a las Naciones Unidas, a las Comisiones de Derechos Humanos.
These embroidery works were sent out to the United Nations, to groups working on human rights.
Y cada funcionario diplomático de la solidaridad, de las iglesias que pasaban por esos campamentos, se llevaban estos bordados a sus países.
So people who were working with the camps, whether in the humanitarian organization, diplomats that would visit the camps, they would then, the women would give them embroidery work to be carried outside of Honduras into the rest of the world, so the rest of the world could see what was happening through their embroidery work.
Y el Museo de la Palabra y la Imagen, a través de Facebook y de Twitter, ha hecho una campaña internacional para que vuelvan a El Salvador estas obras de memoria histórica, y hemos recibido desde Nueva York, el País Vasco, Boston, hemos ido reuniendo todos estos bordados, que ahora tenemos alrededor de 40 o 45 bordados.
And so the Museo began this campaign. All these works were scattered around the world through Facebook and other means. A call was put out to people, to the world, asking people if they had examples of this artwork to please send them to the museum. And the collection that they have now is roughly 40 pieces.
Y para reunir la memoria oral de las protagonistas de esta historia, hemos hecho talleres de bordado para que en el accionar del bordado, o sea, que el bordado sirviera como un disparador de la memoria y poder recoger nosotros sus historias personales en relación a esta acción.
¿Las mismas? O...
Las mismas,
Okay.
Ancianas.
Okay, so this is very interesting. I did not know about this. So the museum has organized these workshops where these women come together now, and they begin to embroider again, and through that return to that kind of artwork and the act of embroidering, they begin to tell, they begin to remember their stories, and these are then recorded by the museum. So there will be a sort of a oral testimony, oral history record of
These
all
are the
this.
same one, right?
Same one, same one, yeah, thank you.
Para ellas ha significado, y nos lo han dicho, que esta acción ha revalorizado el papel de la mujer en el medio del conflicto armado.
So the women tell the people at the museum that doing this has made them sort of reevaluate and be more conscious of the role of women during that whole period of conflict.
Y bueno, yo quisiera darles a ustedes la posibilidad de que hicieran algunas preguntas, y quizás eso nos va a permitir ahondar sobre esta experiencia de memoria colectiva.
Okay, so he will now accept questions. A lot of what he was just describing, of course, is on the panels. You'll be able to read those later on if you haven't read them already, but he's ready to field questions. If you do know Spanish and you want to ask him in Spanish and then translate your own question, that would take a little bit of work off. Hey, hi. Hi, Jude. How are you?
Santiago, ¿había una influencia directa o indirecta de las arpilleras chilenas? Was there a direct or perhaps an indirect influence on these embroideries from the, ¿cómo se dice, arpilleras?
Arpilleras.
Because arpilleras, the embroideries that were political protest in Chile.
In Chile.
She did.
She did. Ella tradujo su propia pregunta.
Ah, sí, ok.
This is Jane
No,
Eyre.
no había una relación. El fenómeno de las arpilleras estaba muy alejado. No llegó esa experiencia de Chile a estas montañas de Morazán. Yo me hice esa misma pregunta, pero en realidad, hablando con las mujeres, dicen que no conocían esa experiencia de las arpilleras, donde también en Chile bordaron historias sobre memoria.
So, summarizing, he doesn't think that there was contact. The arpilleras, it's largely a very similar phenomenon done under the Pinochet dictatorship. Also women embroidering scenes that they were, what they were living under the dictatorship. As far as Santiago knows, these women were not aware of that. And it was an independent phenomenon.
¿Una otra pregunta? Sí.
Trato de hablar español,
Su español es
quizás,
excelente.
yo sé, por visitar la comunidad de San José de las Flores en Chalatenango desde hace 87 y después los grupos de los niños están muy similar de estos con los helicópteros y bombos, etc. Y mi pregunta es, ¿por qué solamente estos de la gente de El Mozote, por ejemplo, y no otras mujeres de Chalatenango o otras partes? I was saying that when we visited El Salvador during the 80s, Cambridge has a sister city with San Jose de las Flores in Chalatenango. The children's drawings were very similar to what you're seeing here with the helicopters and so I was just kind of commenting on that and then wondering why it was sort of why choosing this group of women related to Morazán as opposed to women from other parts of El Salvador. At least that's what I was
Sí,
hoping to say.
precisamente nosotros estamos preparando una exposición de dibujos infantiles para que hagan un diálogo con estos bordados.
Dibujos de aquella época.
Dibujos de los que hacían los niños,
Okay, right.
muy parecidos a lo que hacían las mujeres.
En esa.
Sí.
So in fact, the museum has a large collection of these children's drawings, which are just absolutely heartbreaking. I've seen them myself, and what they're going to try to do is put together an exhibit where we will have a dialogue between these children's drawings and this embroidery work.
Y estos bordados no solamente son de Morazán, son de los 4 campamentos de refugiados donde había población de Chalatenango, de Morazán, de San Miguel, de todo el territorio nacional. El primer que van a ver allá es de Mesa Grande. O sea, aquí están representados todos los grupos campesinos de la parte norte de El Salvador.
Right. So summarizing, actually the embroidery it comes from various parts of El Salvador. The people were fleeing from the country into these large refugee camps, and so actually the impression that they're only from Morazán is not correct. They're coming from other parts of the republic as well.
¿Sí?
¿Cómo están las comunidades? Yo no conozco mucho la situación actual de El Salvador ahorita. Entonces, ¿cómo están estas comunidades? ¿Siguen bajo violencia?
Please
I'm not sure about it. Okay.
She's wondering wondering about these communities, what's happening nowadays, and are they still suffering from violence and forms of, well, the forms of suffering that they were undergoing before, right? In other words, have things changed, or are they more or less in the same situation?
Sí, sabemos que en todo El Salvador el tema de la violencia ha sido uno de los flagelos que ha golpeado a nuestra sociedad.
Everybody knows that the violence is one of the sort of flagelos, the sources of suffering, the whipping lashes that the entire society has to undergo.
Pero hay algo muy curioso. En los territorios del norte, donde hubo más violencia y donde la guerra se desarrolló con más fuerza, son los territorios donde el fenómeno de las maras no ha prosperado.
Yeah, so paradoxically, the areas that were the most, that were the centers of much of the conflict, where the terrible violence in the 80s was going on, those are areas where, in fact, you do not have what we all hear about in the news thanks to Trump and company. So in those areas, actually, things are much quieter than other parts of the country.
Fundamentalmente en las áreas donde las comunidades eclesiales de base tuvieron más fuerza, como en Morazán o en Chalatenango, yo creo que de alguna manera ese ejercicio de tratar de crear comunidades solidarias hoy día han generado una acumulación ética y moral en esas poblaciones que no ha permitido que el tema de la violencia entre en sus comunidades, porque todavía hay un tejido social muy fuerte y que resiste a toda intromisión de la violencia.
Synthesizing, as it turns out, the areas in El Salvador where these Christian-based communities were strongest and suffered the consequences of being so strong, curiously, those are the areas that have less violence, and Santiago's hypothesis is that there were this greater level of stability, of peace in these areas is a remnant of all of this community work that was done within the Christian-based communities for so many years.
Bien, una última pregunta. Sí.
Solo agradecer en nombre de aquí tenemos una organización, una asociación de estudiantes latinoamericanos, Raíces Latinas. Entonces agradecerle, profesor, agradecer a la facultad por mostrar estos casos que en la escuela de teología creo que son muy importantes para ver cómo la fe cristiana ha sido clave en la pacificación y en el sostenimiento de la paz, ¿no? Y también visibilizar algo muy importante que usted decía, que usted introducía, y era la responsabilidad de los Estados Unidos en estos conflictos. Y creo que en la gran mayoría de países de Latinoamérica vemos que si no hubiéramos tenido la influencia de Estados Unidos financiando la guerra, no estaríamos hoy como estamos. Yo soy colombiano y también hay toda una historia muy larga y muy dolorosa ahí. Tenemos un programa un certificado de estudios latinos también, que creo que se ve muy beneficiado por estas iniciativas. Entonces, muchas gracias, y tal vez si pudiera referirse un poco a ese tema de la influencia de Estados Unidos en este conflicto. I was just giving thanks to Professor.
No, it's not. Well, he's a professor of life.
Yeah.
Honoris causa.
Honorary Professor Santiago for his presentation, and I was mentioning that we have a student association here, which is Raíces Latinas, for bringing this presentation, which I think is very important in the School of Theology to show how in Latin America religious-based communities have been important in peace building and sustaining peace. So maybe we all could learn a lot about what's going on in Latin America with these community-based communities. And I was referring as well to the responsibility of the US governments along history in fostering and enhancing the war in our Latin American countries. So maybe Santiago could go a little deeper in that aspect. Thank you.
That's probably a topic for a whole other evening. I would be very happy. Briefly, well, I can sort of keep him out of trouble on this. Just to pick up the point, I was working with, as a bunch of people here, with solidarity work with Central America during that whole war period. Here in the United States, there was huge opposition to that war. Every bullet that was shot there, every bomb was paid for by the good old American taxpayer. And in that sense, I personally, I know people were killed. I know the head of the Jesuit University there, I had lunch with him 1 year before he was shot by forces trained by the United States. So even though I was fighting against the war myself, a bunch of other people here, hey, if you're paying taxes, you own that conflict. You own that conflict. Everybody says, oh, well, everybody has to pay taxes. No, there is such a thing as a tax resistors me. So if you don't pay taxes, then yeah, see, I didn't pay for that, but otherwise we all did. But I actually give, the reason I'm interrupting here, I give courses on this, I work a lot on this, and I would love to fill you in about this. But this was, the United States was in the process of getting out of El Salvador, especially after the rape and murder of the 4 nuns. And as soon as, this was at the end of Jimmy Carter's presidency, and we were cutting off aid, and as soon as Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States, it was restored. When the Mozote massacre occurred, the official story from the US government was that it never happened. Fake news, fake news. This university, if I may, has had an intimate relationship with the Reagan policy towards Central America, because the president of Boston University for 30 years was on the Kissinger Commission on Central America. That was the commission, a bipartisan commission that put together the US strategy towards Central America. It was the blueprint for what we did during those 12, 13, 14 years. And so we, among other things, this university tried to give Jose Napoleon Duarte an honorary degree on 2 occasions. He was the person who was the democratic face of what was going on in El Salvador. He didn't get the doctorate. We were ready for him, but it didn't happen for a variety of reasons. So actually, as a boss, at some point, I'd be happy to tell you how this university was intimately connected in the promoting of that policy that was carried out under Ronald Reagan. So this made that whole conflict even more personal for me, because I was a professor here. And the student organizations here were very, very active on that issue.
Well, it might be interesting for Santiago
Yes.
to say a bit about the relationship, because it wasn't just the Christian-based communities, it was the Christian-based communities in relationship to the political forces of the FMLN working together.
Que se hablaba de la
So
relación
just how
entre las
those
comunidades de base y lo que estaba pasando con la relación con el relationship with the FMLN and all that. Si puedes hablar sobre la conexión entre las comunidades de base y frente y todo lo que estaba
Bueno,
pasando.
brevemente contar que llega un momento en que los operativos militares contra las zonas campesinas ponen el dilema a las comunidades cristianas entre tomar las armas y defenderse o poner la otra mejilla. Eso originó unas grandes discusiones, sobre todo entre los catequistas. Fue un momento muy difícil, muy duro, ¿verdad? Que fue el incorporarse masivamente a las luchas, la lucha armada en defensa de sus propias comunidades. Eso es un momento, crea un cisma inclusive dentro de las comunidades, pero al final la gran mayoría de todas estas familias se incorporan de una u otra manera a la lucha social.
Okay, synthesizing, and thank you for prodding him on this. Actually, I really recommend that video that's on YouTube, La Palabra y el Bosque. It talks exactly about this. That is the moment in which these Christian-based communities, which he was describing, I mean, they were offering the other cheek, and they were taking just huge amounts of repression, and at a particular point, they began to wonder whether they could continue just being on the receiving end of the violence. And so it is in fact true that this happened with other people involved. This was essentially a liberation theology movement. My understanding is that there is a seminar going on at this very moment. They should be up here listening to this. People involved in liberation theology, I mean, people like Ernesto Cardenal in Nicaragua, I mean, there came a point in which they had to decide whether to take up arms, and many of them, in fact, did, and incorporated themselves into the insurgency against the government. That's absolutely true.
Yo quisiera invitarles a que pasen a ver la exposición, pero antes quisiera hacer un llamado a los estudiantes. Me imagino que hay estudiantes acá que están en busca de un sujeto para su tesis de grado, ¿verdad?
Okay, so before you say, this is a sales pitch. He's imagining that at least among some of the people here who are looking for project students, looking for thesis projects, that they have some work for you out there.
En El Salvador tenemos todos los bordados. Es un tema inexplorado en la academia y yo invito a profesores a hacer trabajos sobre el tema y a los alumnos. Qué buen tema para una buena tesis.
Right, so he's inviting everybody in the room to go down, not everybody, students who are interested to go down, researchers, scholars to go down and work on this material which has been conserved by the museum, and that's only the beginning of what they have. They have many, many, many different projects. It's a wonderful installation. They hold it together largely by the efforts, well, there are a lot of people involved, but if this fellow here did not, wasn't constantly answering his email and doing phone calls, it would not be happening. So he's the fellow who makes it happen. At some point, this whole project, I mentioned it, what he is going to be honored for now in Madrid. We hear about the Maras here in the United States. The Maras are in the United States. There are Mareros in Boston, okay, and lots of them else in other cities. And the project, he was talking about this project that they do. I said, wait a minute, they go into these neighborhoods and they're doing cultural workshops in the middle of these to call them hotspots is an understatement. And they go in, and they're young people who are carrying out, they aren't people as old as he and I, it's young people who are going in and carrying out the workshops. It's really an amazing project. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, we have the same thing here in this country. Why not try to do a clone of this project and start working with that population here in the United States? And we have at least, I think it's 700,000 gang members in the United States. Not all of them are Mareros, but that whole project, I think, is just truly amazing, and hopefully there will be more recognition for it. Okay? So, thank you very much.
Muchas gracias por acompañarnos y los invito a acercarse a esta memoria. Seguimos conversando.
Please eat food. We don't want leftovers.